At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon House.
Glad you're with us on this July 23rd, 2025. I'm be joined today by Alex Newman of the New American and LibertySentinel.org. And then Salen Duke. I don't know that Salen's ever been on with us for radio. He's been on with the TV. But we're going to talk about many things, including the Ten Commandments. Have you guys seen the stories about the Ten Commandments getting in, the state legislators saying, we're putting the Ten Commandments back in the schoolroom? And I'm thinking to myself, amen. But what are you going to do about the Supreme Court that ruled in 1980 in a Kentucky case that children should not be allowed to see the Ten Commandments for fear that they're viewing them day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, may be compelled to follow them even if they don't want to. The horror, right? So how will today's Supreme Court see this issue? But again, doesn't this go back to state rights, parental authority? Where in the U.S. Constitution does the federal government have the right to tell the state they can't do this? Congress shall make no law. That's the U.S. Congress. Oh, guess what? The state of Louisiana is not Congress. But somehow they've redefined that term to mean state legislators too. Again, I hate to say it, folks. I don't see any way to save the republic unless we start seceding from the union. I think the deep state is too deep. The federal government is too powerful. The agencies are too big. Look, I'm talking to members of Congress that are telling me they have no control over most of these agencies. In fact, some of these agencies have control over the congressman. So I'm just telling you now, I'm not for a violent civil war. No, I'm for a civil separation. I don't think anything aside from that, we're going to see any returning to God-given constitutional rights being defended. And unless you see President Obama go to jail, perp walked, and there's other people, I can promise you the deep state is still fully intact. When that happens, then I'll start believing that change is really coming. Till then, I'm not buying it. This is all just buying time and reshuffling the deck. Joining me now is Alex Newman to talk about many things, including a 12-year-old little girl who I guess the government school wanted to convince she was a boy, and the parents pushed back, and what do you know? CPS was called Child Protection Services. He joins us now. Alex Newman, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Very much for having me, Brandon.
What do you make, by the way, of my opening statement here today?
I couldn't agree with you more. The idea that the Supreme Court of the United States could ban the Bible or prayer or Ten Commandments in a school is so utterly preposterous. It's so out of line with the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's hard to believe that we could have been dumbed down to that extent. And I will say, going even further, the justice who wrote the dissent way back in the early 1960s in those cases involving prayer and the Bible said something very profound. His name was Potter Stewart. I encourage people to read the dissent. He said what happened here was not the realization of neutrality with respect to religion in the schools as a result of these rulings. He said what we actually did here is we established the religion of secularism, which, of course, John Dewey would have recognized as the religion of humanism, which, if you go back and read his Humanist Manifesto, there is no God, the universe is self-existing and not created, we need communism, we need to get rid of prices, new motivations for economic activity, basically atheistic communism. And they literally established that as the official religion of the United States and forced us as taxpayers to pay for the propagation of this false religion by indoctrinating our children. This was a crime of monumental proportions. No state should have accepted these outrageous opinions, and they should have just said to the Supreme Court, well, come enforce it with your army. That's ridiculous. We're not going to teach a false religion. We're not going to ban the truth in the classroom. You cannot have a legitimate education without the Bible, without Christian truth. And so, this is such an outrage, Brandon, and frankly, I cannot believe that there are still parents who subject their children to these government indoctrination camps. I homeschool my children. I've got them in classical conversations where they say the purpose of education is to know God and make him known rather than to brainwash your kids with LGBTism, climate change propaganda, and make sure they come out illiterate. But and you got Duke coming on. I serve on the board also of Freedom Project Academy. It's online classical K through 12 school. There are so many options out there. And they're very affordable. It's hard for me to understand how a parent who calls himself Christian, a mom who calls herself Christian, could continue subjecting their child to a system that is dumbing down, sexualizing, and indoctrinating our children on an industrial scale. It's a crime.
Yep. And barring, you'll know the deep state has been brought under control, and we have separate but equal branches of government. When you see people like John Brennan and Barack Obama and others perp walked, but I'm not holding my breath. I don't know what's going on here, but I fear it's a lot of theater and distraction. But I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong, but I just don't see that happening. Do you?
Well, I think we'll probably end up seeing some lower level minions fall on their swords to protect the higher level minions. And, I've never regarded Barack Obama as the top of the pyramid. There are much more powerful forces. If they're on your TV screen, they're probably not the top of the pyramid, right? And so I would be very surprised to see Obama thrown in jail, partly just because of the implications of that. It would show that there might actually be accountability. But I don't think they're going to be able to completely brush this under the rug. So my guess is we'll probably see some sort of limited hangout in an intelligence agency term where kind of you get a little bit of the truth so people feel like, oh, we made it right, even though the big criminals, the real criminals, the people who, as many of our top officials have pointed out in recent days, participated in a treasonous conspiracy against our country, those people will get off scot-free and they'll go right back to doing what they've been doing. But, we've got to push for this. It does seem improbable. It does seem unlikely, but we have got to push for accountability here, because if these people are not held accountable, you're exactly right. There will be no hope of restoring our republic and preserving our freedoms.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the CPS, Child Protection Services. 12-year-old little girl goes to school, gets brainwashed that she's a boy, comes home, parents push back, CPS gets called. I mean, this is the kind of thing you and I predicted over and over and over, right?
It absolutely is, Brandon. And I hate to be those guys who say, we told you so, but we absolutely told you so. We've been telling people that this was coming for years and years. This story was unbelievably horrific. This mom, her name is Erin Lee. She sent her little girl to school, and basically the school told her to stay after school for an art club. She was 12 years old. And at this art club, they had one of these gender ideologues. Turns out it was a GSA, used to be Gay Straight Alliance. Now they've rebranded because that wasn't inclusive enough. Now it's the Genders and Sexualities Alliance Club. And this creepy faculty member told these kids that if they weren't totally comfortable in their own body, they might be transgender, and that their parents weren't a safe space. And here's my cell phone number so you can talk to me. Don't talk to your parents about this because they're not going to be safe spaces. And this little girl, thankfully, she did succumb to the indoctrination, but thankfully she knew that, well, I needed to talk to my mom about this. So she explained to her mom what had happened, that she was now transgender, that she had a little flag to represent who she was. And mom and dad obviously were not happy about this. They pulled the little girl out of school immediately, which is obviously the correct thing to do, right? When someone's hurting your child, you protect them. And we actually got the emails about this. We have the public records where senior officials at this school were plotting to have a child welfare investigation into this family because they weren't affirming their daughter's gender delusions. They ended up sending a mandated reporter over to the house to talk with the family. Truly horrifying. And it's going to get worse from here, Brandon. I mean, this family was very fortunate that it didn't escalate further. And now, praise the Lord, the little girl has come to her senses. They did a great movie that I participated in. It's called Art Club. You can find it at on the web for free. But there are many, many other families, Brandon, that are not so fortunate, where these kids get on the path to medicalization. They start taking the puberty blockers, the hormones. They go for castration. They go for double mastectomies and hysterectomies. And at that point, it's over. I mean, there's no going back on this. And this is happening across the country. It's happening even in conservative states. And again, these are crimes being perpetrated against taxpayers, against children, against parents, and the perpetrators need to be held responsible.
And I think you were on Crosstalk yesterday with Jim Schneider, were you not?
I was, yeah. We were talking about the UN. They just investigated us and determined that there's not enough LGBT propaganda in the schools. There's not enough federal control of our schools. We need to redefine education as a human right in line with UN, what they call international law. So very, very dangerous what's happening on the education front. And, I think a lot of people have kind of gone back to sleep because Donald Trump is in the White House, folks. Don't go back to sleep. The danger remains. It's greater than ever. And we have to stay active here.
Mm-hmm. And the UN wants to go after private schools and homeschools.
They do, and that's one of the things that came out in this investigation. They sent over a Pakistani activist, a UN special rapporteur on the right to education, and one of her many conclusions was that, hey, you got all these private schools in America that aren't teaching what the government is demanding be taught. You can't have that. Private schools must be brought under the control of the government so that all children can have their human right to education, which they really mean globalist indoctrination, et cetera. It is crystal clear in this report to the UN Human Rights Council that they regard us as being in violation of international law because the federal government doesn't totally control the schools, because we don't have enough LGBT propaganda, because there are still private schools that don't teach this lunacy. Frankly, again, this is criminal. These people are criminals. They have no business anywhere near a school, anywhere near a child. The idea that they're going to tell us as a free, sovereign, supposedly independent country what we need to be teaching our children is an absolute outrage.
Yeah, 100%. Now, in my book in 1993, Reclaiming a Nation, Critical College and Educational Abduction, in the book in 95, Reclaiming a Nation at Risk, I warned about things like America 2000, which became Goal 2000, which became, No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, Common Core. I don't care whether it's Republican, Democrat, it's all the same thing. It all started under George H. Bush, Mr. New World Order. And as you know, all of this came from Robert Mueller at the United Nations. George Mueller was a great man of prayer, different guy. Robert Mueller at the United Nations, who is called the father of global education. So all of this is simply that we've been doing in America anyway, which I hate to say was greatly furthered under the Department of Education with Betsy DeVos, right? Under the first Trump administration.
She went down to the G20 and signed an agreement promising to continue internationalizing education, continue infusing the curriculum with common values like sustainable development. This is language straight from the text that she signed onto on behalf of the United States.
Yeah. So the point I'm making that and make sure the audience understands is all of that we've been doing in America anyway is already a global UN plan. It's just our version in America of it. It's all over the globe, right? From Robert Mueller.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that's why you and I have been saying for years, they're going to eventually come after the homeschoolers in the Christian schools, particularly as homeschooling and private schools have spiked in demand. So here they are coming after us.
Yep. And in 2022, Brandon, the UNESCO, which, by the way, we just Trump announced yesterday we were getting out of UNESCO. Praise the Lord. Yep.
Yes.
But UNESCO put out a report in 2022 saying free money for the private schools to bring them under control. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alex. Alex Newman checking in. The LibertySentinel.org, LibertySentinel.org. He heard that music. You see, he's a professional. Now, he'll be with us. Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. He'll be with us here in the Mid-South, outside of Memphis, in Collierville, Tennessee. Speaking, there are only 350 seats, folks. It's a beautiful theater owned by our town. They're letting us rent it. And there's only 350 seats. Gordon Chang, Sidney Powell, so many people. Full details, worldviewstore.com.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we.
Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
And welcome back. Glad you are with us. Now, don't forget, we not only have Worldview Tube, but we've added worldviewtube.com/history. We've added worldviewtube.com/prophecy, which is Bible prophecy. And Logan, do we have worldviewtube.com/Bible going yet? It's about to be going. I was going through a bunch of our archives today, folks. I'm so pleased and so blessed to be able to tell you how many years of just cutting edge Bible teaching we have. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to host these Worldview weekends, our annual conference, and then bring in our professional camera crew. And we've got so many great keynote presentations of Bible teaching filmed with multiple cameras by guys that are no longer with us. Jimmy DeYoung, Ed Heinzen, and we're so thankful. There's more. I mentioned Jimmy DeYoung, Ed Heinzen, but there's more than that. John Whitcomb, Dr. John Whitcomb. So we're so thankful for that. So 24-hour Bible teaching program coming soon as well. And we're pushing it all out as ministry broadcast, free of charge, brought to you by our foundation in part, worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Joining me now is Selwyn Duke. Selwyn's been with us on TV, but I don't think he's ever been with us on our 74 Christian stations with VCY America Radio, and of course, WROS out of Jacksonville, Florida. And of course, we're here on Worldview Tube. But we're glad to have him with us because he's a very prolific writer and author. And he's writing on several things I think we need to bring attention to. One of them we've already alluded to, the posting of the Ten Commandments. When I saw that some of these states have passed legislation to post these, I thought, again, what's the Supreme Court going to do about it? Not that they should have any say about what we do in our states anyway. Congress shall make no law representing or establishing a religion. The legislature of Louisiana or Arkansas is not Congress, but they do word games. That's what communists do. Cultural Marxists love to do defining of words. Well, Congress doesn't mean the U.S. Congress. That means all state legislators too. Really? But that's what they're doing. So how is this likely to go down? And particularly the court versus 1980, when it came to Kentucky posting the Ten Commandments versus the court today. Joining me to discuss that and more is Selwyn Duke, who writes over at thenewamerican.com. Selwyn, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be with you, Brannon.
Great to have you here.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Your article is entitled, SCOTUS May Overturn 45-Year Precedent, which itself overturned a 193-year precedent. Tell me about this, Selwyn.
Okay, yeah, well, you were just talking about it, but 3 states in recent times, Texas, we have Louisiana, and Arkansas, correct? Mm-hmm. They made laws stating that the Ten Commandments must be posted in every classroom, which is a good idea. Now, of course, unsurprisingly, we have had liberal groups, atheist groups file lawsuits against these laws based on that 1980 ruling you were talking about, which is Stone v. Graham. Now, the problem with this is that it's just based on sophistry. There's no constitutional basis for their lawsuit whatsoever. First of all, we should remember that prior to 1980, it was not uncommon for schools to hang copies of the Ten Commandments, okay? And if you go back even further on our history to the late 18th century and early 19th century, it was very common for the Bible to be taught in schools, okay? So that is the 193-year precedent I was talking about, the fact that we had always, in accordance with our consensus constitutional understanding, had religion, Christianity, infused in the public square and in the schools, okay? But now we have this ridiculous idea based on a specious understanding of the separation of church and state that that's not allowable anymore. Now, I don't think, Brandon, that I've got to tell your viewers that the separation of church and state is not in our Constitution. It's something Thomas Jefferson spoke about in his 1802 letter to the Danbury Baptists, but even then he was just saying that the idea of this separation was to keep the feds out of religion, not to keep religion out of government. And not only that, his view was a minority view at the time. There was no such thing as separation. But do you know where the separation of church and state is found? It is a constitutional principle. You're going to love this. It's in the 1936 Soviet Constitution.
That's right.
Also known as the Stalin Constitution. Now, there's a lot more I want to say about this, but I don't want to go on too long. So save that for a moment.
All right. So what do you think the Supreme Court's going to do when they get this? And are they? Has anyone, has a separation, or let's see, it'd be Barry Lynn's group, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. And is that the name of his group still, Barry Lynn?
Yeah, I don't know if he's the head of it anymore. I think
neither.
This woman Laser is the head of it, but I could be mistaken.
Okay. So are
the
the ACLU, have any of these groups sued any of these three states yet?
Yeah, we have lawsuits in all three of the states. And the fact is it's probably going to be heard by the Supreme Court. As far as what the outcome will be, I'm feeling pretty positive about that, but you never really know for sure. So you can't say anything definitive about that. What I will say is this: let's talk about the arguments that we as Christians should be mounting, because unfortunately, the understanding that we have of this issue, and I mean most all of us, really is very, very poor, okay? First of all, they apply when determining whether something should be allowable, something called the lemon test. And boy, it is a lemon. It's ridiculous. One of the tiers of the lemon test is that whatever is done must have, quote, a secular purpose. That's not said in our Constitution whatsoever. It's completely unconstitutional, or at least, yeah, it's unconstitutional and ahistorical as far as the most of our history goes. Because look, if you go back to 1789, the opening of the first Congress, they opened it with Christian prayers. These were the founders of the nation. Did they have a secular purpose? Now, are we going to make the case that the men who forged the First Amendment, who wrote the Constitution, didn't know what they meant when they wrote it? That's what you would have to assert if you're going to say that having religion in the public square is somehow contrary to the Constitution. It's ridiculous. Again, and this didn't just happen in Congress where we opened it with prayers, and we still do, by the way, to this day, and they still are primarily Christian, those prayers. But this happened in smaller legislatures, still does. I mean, there was a case, Greece versus the state of New York, I believe, that stated that this was absolutely fine, was constitutional to do. That's what the Supreme Court stated. Of course, though, we're not supposed to have judicial supremacy. So even if they said no, I would say, well, we could buck that. As you indicated earlier, Brannon, you know, the federal government should not have a say in these matters at all. But the point is this has nothing to do with the Constitution. It has nothing to do with our history. It has to do with the imposition of a left-wing agenda. And, you know, there's this one fellow who is arguing against these laws about posting the Ten Commandments. And he said, well, basically, whose values are going to prevail? Why is Christianity prevailing in these schools? Why not the Code of Hammurabi? Okay, well, you might say, why do we have feminist-oriented suppositions in schools and not patriarchal ones? Why do we have diversity emphasized in schools and not uniformity, not a common culture? You know, why do we have green priorities emphasized in schools and not economic ones? You know, why might they serve rice or potatoes during lunch and not couscous? It's a ridiculous question because at the end of the day, in a civilization, in any situation, you are always making qualitative judgments, value judgments. You have to. That's how it works. And the power to do that should lie with the local school boards, with the states, in accordance with the Constitution. And what's really happening here, though, Brannon, is you have all of these left-wingers who, when it comes to their own values, okay, they don't apply this standard at all. You know, something C.S. Lewis, the philosopher, said is relevant here. He said, their skepticism about values lies only on the surface. It is for use on other people's values. As far as the values current in their own set go, they're not nearly skeptical enough.
So true. All right. What else are you writing about over there at thenewamerican.com that's germane to where we're going? I think I saw an article by you the other day. You're concerned about 2028, and you're not convinced that we won't see a return to a socialist controlled White House in 2028, correct?
Well, correct. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the trends in society, and Alex Newman just mentioned this, he said a lot of people have become complacent because Trump is in office.
Right.
That does not necessarily change the cultural trajectory. That's what you have to understand. In the 1980s, we had Reagan in office. He was the first president I ever voted for, Brannon. And he was a very good president in most respects. But at the end of the day, all during that period, the culture continued moving towards what we call the left. And that's significant because politics is downstream from culture. Now, I wrote recently about this Mamdani in New York City, how he has risen to the fore. 6 months ago, he was at 1% in the polls in the mayoral race. He was an also-ran. Now he's the leader. He's the favorite to become the mayor of the biggest city in our nation. And this man is absolutely, positively a Marxist. He has stated that their ultimate goal, this was in a 2021 video, is, quote, the seizure of the means of production.
That's right.
Okay?
We played it.
That's a communist tenet. Now, I'm mentioning this because I understand it's New York City, but if you look at this, you see this trend among the younger generations throughout the nation. Yes, there's a subset of Gen Z that is trending Republican and has been for a while, but you also see that so-called socialism is very, very popular among them. And, you know, unfortunately, we also, Brannon, have too many people that just vote on emotional bases. A lot of this just has to do with charisma. And I will say, pundits, people in our business, tend to underestimate the impact of this factor because we're so policy oriented. We're politics wonks. We don't understand that the average person is operating based on emotion and is swayed by charismatic figures, of which Mamdani is one. Trump is one, by the way, and nothing wrong with that. You can be good or bad and be charismatic. But my point is, studies have shown that in elections, the most charismatic candidate usually wins. So not all of this is governed by logic.
You got that right. And then you got the character up in Atay up there in Minneapolis. He's also a Marxist and an Islamist from some Somalian heritage.
Yeah, no, he is, absolutely. And that's another example of what I'm talking about. And of course, it's another city, and cities are more liberal than the countryside. But again, these trends are widespread, and we really have to understand that as long as we keep descending into moral relativism, we keep straying away from God, we keep descending into immorality, this will continue. Okay.
Do you see a civil war coming? Okay. I don't want a civil war, but I would like to see a civil separation because I don't think we're going to see what we need. I hope we will, but based on the first 6 months of what's going on with the resistance the Trump administration is receiving, which we knew they would, and based on a lot of the distraction of things that are happening, including it seems as though we are going to keep funding Ukraine and continue that war and maybe go to war with Russia and NATO. And Martin Armstrong is saying that starting tomorrow, his analysis, his computers that track things are saying we're headed toward World War III. It's 100% guaranteed. Well, whether that's true or not, we'll see. But I think a lot of this stuff is going to distract from the domestic, okay? And I think this is it. If President Trump and the Republicans largely in the House and Senate have become worthless, I mean, Mike Johnson just declared a day early recess, and they're coming back till September because apparently they don't want to deal with the Epstein controversy. Well, if this trajectory continues, we're not going to see a reestablishing of the constitutional republic that we need and reigning in the federal government, which leaves us with only one choice, and that is enough people in enough states to start demanding from their legislature that we secede from the union. Something we have the right to do. We have the right to do. I don't care who won the Civil War. I do care who won the Civil War, but that was largely what the Civil War was about. You can say it's about slavery, but it also comes down to state rights and this perpetual contract that can never be, exited. If we don't see that, we're doomed to slavery. We'll be right back.
I'll tell you one little quick story. We had a Worldview Weekend client who lived in California, lost their house. Very wealthy guy. He didn't use Bitcoin. He came over here, drove to Arizona with $286,000 worth of his gold because he had no money and no house available. His bank was shut down because he couldn't have access to his bank account.
Was this during the fire? Was this during the fires?
During the fire. Didn't have his driver's license. He lost it. The state wouldn't give him a new license because he had no active mailing address. Real mess. So he came to Arizona to buy a house. He's moving everything over. He said, the only thing I got in my possession that I can get liquid with right now is my gold. I gave him a check for $286,000, and guess what? I didn't need his social, his driver's license. Sort of smiled, and I said, I know you and Brandon talked about how this worked, but boy, this is great. I feel good. I got my money. Nobody bothered me, and I'm protected, and it's private.
Just simply go to worldviewgold.com, fill out the form, worldviewgold.com. All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. And of course, we're getting word right now that Russia and Ukraine have ended their Istanbul peace talks after about 34 minutes. So there you go. Not making a lot of progress. Selwyn Duke joins me from The New American, thenewamerican.com, thenewamerican.com. Selwyn, all of his articles are there. So are we headed for if we start seeing the rise of these Islamist, Marxist, the red-green axis embodied in one person, these candidates. We talk about the red, the Marxist, the green, the Islamist. But now we get the candidates that are both. They're both Islamist and they're Marxist, which of course fits because one of the pillars of Islam is social justice, i.e. Marxism. And we could go on and on about that. But anyway, at some point, aren't the folks of Tennessee and Arkansas and Mississippi and a few other states, aren't they finally going to say, look, we have nothing in common anymore. A house divided against itself cannot stand. We do not have common values. You guys hate God. You hate America. You hate what America stands for. You hate a constitutional republic. You hate the laws of God, laws of nature. Nature is God. You don't agree with, thou shalt not steal. You're for stealing. You're for confiscating private property. You openly state that. We're done. There's nothing that binds us together. We're exiting. Comment? Is that coming?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree with you. I said that the trend has been that the country has been drifting left now, really for a very, very long time, at least 100 years. But within that trend, you see other trends. And one of them, Brandon, is that you see this bifurcation between the so-called red and the so-called blue states. The liberal states in recent years have been getting more liberal, and the conservative states have been getting more conservative. So you're seeing a division right there that's becoming more extreme all the time. And by the way, I do predict, maybe this is going to get me in trouble, that we will see America partitioned one of these days. I've believed that for many years now. I do believe that.
I would be glad to run. I would be glad to run to be the leader of the South East Division.
Yeah, but let me tell you something. It's not just people on the right who are saying this. If you look at people on the left, whenever they get upset, like when Trump won re-election, they start saying, well, we should have secession. California should secede. A hotbed of secession historically was New England, which is very liberal now. So it's not just people on the right saying this, but we also have to understand something else. How do fights start in the street? Well, they start with arguing, which turns into name calling and shouting and then shoving, right? It escalates. What do we see in our society? Mm-hmm. We see the same process on a larger scale. We see debates, irreconcilable differences, which you just mentioned, some of them, okay? We see people, especially on the left, becoming violent in their rhetoric, name calling, lying, which is a form of violence, really. Lying is the worst form of impoliteness, as I've put it. We see actual violence now, 99% of which originates with the left, and that is an absolute fact. Look at 2020 of those 600 plus Antifa BLM riots. So you see us following this pattern, and if this continues, okay, things are going to keep on escalating, and then what happens? At some point, unless there's a de-escalation, it ends up as a huge conflagration. Mm-hmm. That's what happens.
Now, are we being played here, Selwyn? Because my friend Trevor Loudon, who I had on last night, has warned about Tulsi Gabbard for a long time and her speaking at communist groups and running around with these guys. And he doesn't trust her. He wrote about her. He's been writing about her for like 7 years, okay? Saying, here's who she works with, here's who she goes and speaks with, here's the groups. I mean, these are open socialist / communist groups. Okay, this is what he laid out again last night. And people can agree, they can disagree. And, people say, well, maybe she's changed. Okay. I'm happy with what she's doing now. But here's the question. Are we being played? Because if you say, well, Barack Obama this, John Brennan that, Clapper this, all they're doing is piling up and showing us that the federal government is corrupt to the core. It is a special club. We are not in the club. And really, Congress has been co-opted and is completely impotent. I mean, really, I don't mean to be unkind, but does anybody really get a strong sense of masculinity from Mike Johnson? I mean, he's the epitome of a Washington Republican, is he not? I mean, the same thing with the guy that was, Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Did he scream masculinity? Are these guys John Wayne characters, Ronald Reagan characters? No. Ronald Reagan saddling up his own horse, cleaning out the shoes of his own horse, all the building his fences. I mean, these guys are the typical demasculized, skinny white males that we expect from Washington, okay? So we're not shocked. But what we're being told here is about everything we've known. D.C. is corrupt. It's a swamp. And there's a deep state, okay? And Tulsi is now piling on the information. Donald Trump, for the first time, thankfully, said President Obama is involved in treason. Okay, so you're either doing this because you're going to really do something, or this is a big distraction, or Tulsi, she's trying to keep her job in the White House after she put out this really weird video about nuclear war coming, which I heard upset President Trump. And she's now throwing red meat into the Oval Office to keep her job. Or there's something even bigger. They want a civil war. And now they're going to throw all this red meat, get the right all stirred up with the Hegelian dialectic, thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, and they collide. And you stir everybody up on the right, on the left, and then you have zero solutions, meaning nothing changes. Now, if you're going to ramp up the right by giving them more and more proof of what they already know to be true, and you rev them up, and then you do nothing, what do you think is going to happen? So I wonder if someone like Tulsi Gabbard isn't trying to keep her job, but also if what we're told by Trevor Loudon is true, is she not throwing a lot of red meat to rev up the right? And what could that be used for in the coming days? And at the end of this term, when nothing's changed. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, let me give you a different perspective, because I don't think we're, quote, being played. I think the reality is this. There's a saying, Brandon, never attribute to malice what is better explained by stupidity. The reality is that human beings are very flawed. We all are. Okay, we're all sinners. And at the end of the day, as Otto von Bismarck, the German leader, said, politics is, quote, the art of the possible. Okay, it's not the art of you get whatever you want 100% right now, no questions asked, but of the possible. And what I mean is we're living in a society that, as we said, is very far from God. So we're not going to see the kinds of leaders in office nationwide that we would like to see. Okay, we're going to see a few of them, but then we're going to see a motley crew of other individuals. And that's what the Trump administration comprises. You have people like Stephen Miller, who I think are very much true blue, doesn't quite have our vision for the country, I'm sure, but I like him a lot and he's very intelligent. Then you have other people like Tulsi Gabbard. She was a Democrat not too long ago. And people, when they do things, Brandon, can have multiple motivations, some noble, some ignoble, preserving their job, having some principles that they operate by, but then, of course, how much are they willing to sacrifice for those principles? It gets very, very complex. So what I'm saying is, within the administration, you have a lot of different forces coming together, and there's a tug of war, not just from two directions, but multiple directions, perhaps. So I think that's more the situation than anything else. I don't think we're being played. I just think that it's hard to get what we would want, on a regular basis in a society that's very, very secular.
Okay, so if we're not being played, though, if we're not being played, though, Selwyn, isn't the end result still the same? you lay out all this credible information that your government is more corrupt than many Americans know. You and I know. I mean, this audience knows that long before Epstein was being talked about and these other guys, I was telling this radio audience, most of your politicians are captured, right? And a lot of people probably couldn't believe how corrupt and evil it is. But it's, people have gone there, have said to me, it's worse than you know. Even what you paint is rosier than it really is. So the same is true, though, the outcome. What if she and others are laying out all this information and it only confirms what we know and others need to know, which is this is almost to a point where it is not reformable, which again lays the foundation. What are certain states going to do when you realize this thing is such a cesspool, you cannot be governed by the corruption out of Washington? So again, that is the inevitable. I mean, they're making our case. Those of us who are saying this experiment in America has failed. And it failed because we failed, not the founders. We failed because it was written for a moral people, a Christian people, right? Here's a clip. Keep your finger on the dump button because I don't know what she's about to say, but this is breaking news from Tulsi Gabbard, who just went to the White House podium. I don't think she normally swears, but keep your finger on the dump button.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. At President Trump's direction and with the support and coordination with the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford, today we've released a declassified oversight majority staff report that was produced in September of 2020. The stunning revelations that we are releasing today should be of concern to every American. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic and American voters having faith that the votes cast will count. There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They knew it would promote this contrived narrative that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help President Trump win, selling it to the American people as though it were true. It wasn't. The report that we released today shows in great detail how they carried this out. They manufactured findings from shoddy sources. They suppressed evidence and credible intelligence that disproved their false claims. They disobeyed traditional tradecraft intelligence community standards and withheld the truth from the American people. In doing so, they conspired to subvert the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump in that election in November of 2016. They worked with their partners in the media to promote this lie, ultimately to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump and launching what would be a years-long coup against him and his administration.
Now, it's just out. Literally, that was 4 minutes before we went on the air today, Central Time. Now, again, I like to think the lady's changed. I'd like to think that she's seen the light and she's come to the center. Okay, Trevor Loudon isn't, so sure about that. And you can watch our interview with Trevor from last night at worldviewtube.com when and if it's posted, which it should be already. If it's not, it will be soon. It is now, worldviewtube.com. You can mark it and watch it later after crosstalk. But I like to give people the benefit of the doubt when I can and think people change. But regardless, I like what she's doing. Okay, so I can say I don't care for them and their worldview a lot of times or their policies, but over here I love what they're doing here. That's just again the nature of politics, unfortunately, right? So I say thank you, Tulsi, good job. But if nothing is done, all you're going to do is pile on more facts from the White House podium as to why the federal government is not reformable. You can't reform it. Therefore, states must start talking about secession. A quick comment before we go to hard break and bring in the callers.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think the American experiment has failed. There's no question about it. However, it goes beyond that because you have to remember that, let's say we have this secession and we have a new, better country that's formed. It's still not going to be a perfect land. We're still going to have to resolve many of the issues we have today. We're still going to have people who are too far from God, who are too deeply immersed in moral relativism, for instance. So
well, I agree with that.
I'm just saying that, yeah.
I agree with you on that. And 1-800-347-9829 is the number. 1-800-347 347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions. Make your comments quick and fast. We can roll through as many calls as possible. 1-800-347-9829. Maybe the solution for a lot of them is some kind of major global national crisis, and they just roll us into a North American Union. That'd take care of that.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed. All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. We're going to, of course, get into all this tonight on Brandon House Live at worldviewtube.com tonight. But, wow. Let's go to the phone lines. 1-800-347-9829. 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions. My guest, Selwyn Duke, thenewamerican.com. Do I have that right, Selwyn?
Yes, absolutely.
Let's go to John in Texas, line 1. Hello, John.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks. So what caused God to judge Judea, and what caused God to judge the United States, and what caused God to judge there was one other one.
Well, I'll tell you, let me just answer the question before we keep moving. Or you go to Deuteronomy, you go to Leviticus, you start seeing real quick, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this. If you don't do this, I'm going to do this. And then you keep doing this, I'm going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. And it comes down to mixing, as we said yesterday, paganism, witchcraft, sorcery, divination, immorality, rejecting God, pagan worship, idol worship, rejecting the laws of nature. Nature is God, precepts of God. And again, I have to ask, as I did yesterday, Selwyn, is America at a Nahum tipping point, the prophet Nahum, where you guys were plotting evil against the Lord? And that seems to be, according to Nahum chapter 1, a major tipping point was when you start trying to invent new ways to be evil against God. Quick comment before we go to the next call.
Yes, now, I thought we were at that tipping point a while back. And again, that's the problem. Yeah.
All right, let's go back to the phone lines. Let's go to David in Missouri, line 3. Hi, David.
Hi.
Hi.
Question I got for everybody to ask themselves is, does Donald Trump have skin in this game or not? I mean, he has thrown rocks at the hornet's nest, and he might be forced to do something, whether the rest of the administration wants to do something or not, if he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in jail. It's either that or else there's some agreed upon gentleman's agreement that, he will not be prosecuted after this current term ends.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're saying, David, what a lot of people are thinking, has there been some kind of gentleman's agreement between President Trump and the deep state? Or if there's not, and he goes down this road, what do you think is going to happen to him when he's no longer the president? So at that point, does he have to say, look, we have had a coup d'etat in this country, and I'm invoking the Insurrection Act. And now we're going to all kinds of different scenarios. But you're right. Is he not just setting himself up to have them go after him when he's out of the White House, Selwyn?
Oh, yeah, that's occurred to me. I mean, this is a very, very dangerous game for him. There's no doubt about it, because we know how vicious the left is. I mean, look at what they did to Trump during the lead up to this last election and what they did to him before. So that would only become more intense. There's no doubt about it. But does he have skin in this game? I think Trump really does care about the country. Now, his vision for it is not exactly like ours. As Tucker Carlson put it, his vision for America is Studio 54 circa 1979. It's better than what we have today, but it's not like me. As I put it, I'm Mayberry meets the Middle Ages. That's what epitomizes me.
Let's go to Jim, line 2. Jim, thanks for calling in today.
Yes, they say MAGA, and the way I like to look at it is to make America godly again. That's what made America great to begin with.
Yep.
And there's so much information out there. Bill Federer's got a lot of good information on our godly heritage, and every time June rolled around, I wanted to declare it American Christian Heritage Month and educate the people of our Christian heritage, because if they don't, I mean, there's a lot of Trump supporters I know, but when you try to talk to them about spiritual things, they're just like clueless.
Yep.
So we need to connect them with what's really made America great to begin with.
Amen. Amen. And I was texting with Bill Federer today. I think he might be on the broadcast tonight. Let's go to Gerald, line 1. Gerald's calling in from Kansas. Hi, Gerald.
Hello. Thank you, Brandon, for all you do with your show. I was just wanting to respond quickly to your call for secession, or showing that, yes, there is I saw that you showed that there is a place for that, and that's provided in our Constitution, obviously, but I think that people interested in that need to apply their efforts toward cleaning up the country, as you have.
Mm-hmm.
We have a precious union. Many have paid a huge sacrifice for it. And regardless of what we get, if we secede, our nation will be attacked and devoured by our nation's enemies, and that is just what they want to achieve in our country.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and that's why I agree with you in regards to they want to achieve that. That's why I keep asking, why all this information? Why all this information? It seems only to be fueling what many of us have said and known, and now the general wider public is going to find out just how corrupt Washington is. And if nothing is done to bring justice, then all you have done is frustrate a lot of people. And to what end, right? And I don't know, again, if there's a big Hegelian dialectic process here going on that's trying to get us to agree to go somewhere like Patrick Wood and I are warning, that eventually it's going to cause Americans to say, you know what, they're all corrupt, most of them. Almost all of them are corrupt, a pox on all their houses. Let's just go to AI. Let's just go to let AI be our representatives. Let AI write the bills. Let AI be the judges. Because guess what? AI can't be molesting little children or be on video having sexual relations with underage children. And therefore, then we have, the judges in our legislature being controlled. I'm not for that, but you're going to see that increasingly, that this experiment has failed. Let's go to AI. Others are going to be, you know what? Let's just go to a North American Union. Let's just go to a North American Union. I mean, the question is, what are the globalists setting us up for? Why are they getting people stirred up if they're not going to offer real solutions and remedy? Selwyn?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, it's interesting because G.K. Chesterton once said, the reformer is always right about what is wrong. He is also usually wrong about what is right. And my point here is that you're saying people are just going to throw up their hands, say everyone is corrupt. That's cynicism, the belief that all people act out of selfish motives. That doesn't get us anywhere. The devil wants us to become cynical.
Right,
because
I agree.
When we become cynical.
I agree, but you do know that that's where a lot of the American politics is now, a lot of the polls. That's why people have become apathetic and passive and checked out. They think it doesn't matter. How many people said that after the 2020 election was stolen? I'm done. I'm checking out. It doesn't matter. Now, if you bring up a lot of corruption and you document it and you do nothing, it's going to only fuel to the apathy, the passivity, or the just anger and bitterness. All I'm saying is you cannot bring these facts up, shine the truth on them, and then leave nothing done. That is only going to create a problem. Huge. Another conversation for another day, I guess. Stay tuned for Crosstalk. Don't go away. Don't go away. We'll be right with you. But stay tuned for Crosstalk, folks. Take care. All right, let's run back to Selwyn, because we're still with World YouTube and WROS out of Jacksonville, Florida. So you understand what I'm saying, right? You cannot do this to the American people without having a negative consequence for either people becoming passive, apathetic, or angry and bitter and tripping them. You cannot do this. I know what the psychological impact and the mental and spiritual impact is going to be on people.
Right. No, absolutely. Look, I don't disagree with that because that's just pure logic. What I'm saying is this, all I can do is offer some perspective. And what I'm saying is that if you become cynical, you've fallen into the trap of the devil because then you're not seeing the good. You have to understand there's good as well. And how are people going to see the good? They're only really going to see the good, or they definitely will, when they believe in the ultimate good, God, in Jesus. They say, hey, this exists. It's a real thing. And then, of course, you have to understand that the virtues exist. Like I've said before on your show, if morality came in a jar, virtues would be on the ingredients label. Understand what they are, try to apply them in your own life, cultivate them in your children, encourage them in your society. That's what you need to do.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But
one more.
Okay, one more thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, one more thing. Remember, this is a fallen world. There's no such thing as perfect justice. We've got to get as much justice effected as we can, but it's never going to be perfect. That's a little more perspective.
Okay, so with that, and I agree with all that.
Yeah.
But where do you see this going? If you had to guess now, with your years of experience in public policy and history, where do you see all of this going? Where are we at 3.5 years from now?
Okay, well, I'm going to get people running for the Prozac, I guess. But what I see is that we're going to continue to decline morally as we have for 100 years. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior until we collapse, and then the civilization is going to reboot in some form, and we have to be ready for that. But in the meantime, because we don't really know the future, we still all have to fight the good fight. Remember what Jesus said. I don't want you lukewarm. I want you hot or cold. We have to be burning with passion for the good and with passion for true reform.
I agree. So if nothing changes in 3.5 years from now, we flip over to Obama's boys being back in control, the Islamist and the Marxist. Now, how do you think the right is going to respond to that? Because we were just told by Trump, the Islamist and Marxist, Barack Obama and his boys, are corrupt to the core. They're lawless. They're treasonous. But, oh, by the way, we expect all of you to accept the results of the election and come under their control. Okay, I guess maybe, I don't know. I think you understand what I'm saying, but I'm trying to convey to the audience there is a recipe that is being built here that has never been done before in American history. Never. This has never happened in American history. A president in the Oval Office saying the last president a couple times ago was he is a treasonous, lawless thug. Now you have D&I. Obama, the president, was involved in a coup. This makes Watergate look like someone spilled the lemonade at the church picnic. This is huge. And you cannot put this out here and then say, oh, by the way, we lost the election, which was likely, again, stolen like 2020. But hey, I'm going off to retirement, guys. Good luck. Obama's boys are back in charge. The lawless thugs. This is where we're going, Selwyn.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And let me just paint a little scenario for you. You said, what happens? Well, if the left regains executive power, and it still is cultural power, of course, it's going to keep on pushing. It's going to keep on instituting more and more left-wing policies. And at some point, you push people too far. And the more conservative states, which, as I said earlier, have been becoming even more conservative in recent times, may just at some point say, no, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And listen to this, okay? If it gets to a point where the U.S. federal government can no longer meet its financial obligations, Social Security, the other entitlements, if you want to call them that, then the states are no longer going to have an incentive to stay in the union. And if that happens, we collapse financially, then of course all bets are off. You really could see this dissolution of the country that we've been talking about.
I just got an email from, don't show my screen, but I just got an email from a longtime listener, Marcus. He says, I agree, we're being played. Perhaps instead of Obama being prosecuted, Trump will get impeached and prosecuted, igniting civil war. There's that Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah.
So instead of going after the real criminals, now we're going to go after Trump. Again, I never underestimate the left and their ability to think ahead, because you see, we are not evil like they are. We're also not demonically inspired like they are. So I never underestimate when I see something happening, thinking, how is this going to play out for their eventual success. And I think Marcus understands what I'm saying. We have to make sure that this is, because we know this is spiritual. So we have to ask ourselves, is there a huge trap coming? By the way, I'd like to know if they got Trump building all these Alcatraz places. They want one in every state. Yeah, I think that could be flipped. And Selwyn and I could be sharing a chain link fence in those. You've seen the pictures of them, but the toilet's not flushing. TheNewAmerican.org or .com. Thanks for watching. Take care.